Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Black and Blurred.
Hi.
That's Darren.
That's me.
I'm Brandon. Guys, do Black Lives Matter? Darren, do Black Lives Matter?
Of course. Of course they do.
Wait, but you have to break down what that statement means, right? Because it's been so convoluted, right?
Oh, yeah. So Black Lives Matter only when they get killed by the police.
Oh, all right. That I didn't expect you to go that route, but that's unfortunately, it seems that that's the case. But what would it look like if Black Lives mattered because of a genuine value for human life, and a genuine value from human life mattering because of a relationship with the one who made humans? Mm-hmm. We're going to have a conversation with that. We have some special guests with us this evening, Mr. Neil Mammen and Kevin McGary of Every Black Lives Matter organization. Every Black Life Matters.
Every Black Life Matters
organization. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us. It's awesome.
Yeah, we are in, I guess, for lack of a better phrasing, post-election.
Yeah.
Post voting.
Yeah. That's right. Post voting.
Right.
And something beautiful that happens after that is all of the buzz topics stop taking over the TV a little bit, just a little bit. And why that's beautiful is now voices on the outside and the fringe actually begin to be able to weigh in. I think the topics end, but the conversations must continue because the good thing that happens with the hyper politicized culture is that when these conversations come up, only certain voices are given a platform, and they're just on your screen all day long. And so the Christian seems sometimes to feel behind the eight ball because you talk to somebody and they seem to have a script already prepared. And it's like, where are you getting this from?
The TV.
And so now we want to continue that conversation when we talk about life, when we talk about Black lives, when we talk about what it means to have a slogan of Black Life Matters. And we talk to these two gentlemen from the Every Black Life Matters organization. One of you guys just give us an introduction into where this began and how this came to be. How did you guys become the founders of this organization?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and handle that, Neil, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Neil and I have been friends and collaborators for some time. We're both in sort of the IT industry here in Silicon Valley. And we're both of like minds when it comes to culture, society, biblical reality, civic engagement, all of those things we sort of have in common. So when Black Lives Matter came out this time with such a big bang over the summer and aggregated over $2 billion in just like 60 or 90 days in commitments, Neil said, you know what? They've got a lot of momentum and they really are going to completely overwhelm culture and society for a while because they have so much momentum and being played up in all the media and everywhere else. And he says, I wonder if there's a counter narrative that we can come up with that we could really be about Black life, right, and really celebrate Black life, but be a counter narrative to Black Lives Matter. What we both realized is if Black lives matter generally, then every single Black life must matter specifically.
Yeah.
You can't leapfrog and say, well, Black lives matter, but every Black life doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't make. And so we thought about that. We noodled on that overnight. And the next day, we came back together. I said, Neil, I think we really should pursue an opportunity here to come up with a counter revolution. Except we're not just going to give lip service to police brutality and only police brutality where there's a white police officer or the black victim. Yeah. But we should really sincerely pursue every phase of Black life. The Black lifespan starts in the womb, conception, and all the way through natural death. And we have various areas of plight along the way. disproportional plight.
Yeah.
The biggest disproportional plight is just getting us out of the womb.
Yeah.
This because we're targeted, right? The second disproportional plight is then early childhood development and getting some the ability to have some educational choices. Then then we have a number of others, just living in a community that could be violent, could be, riotous, whatever. And then we have fatherlessness that plays into our plight scenarios. And so we really do have what we would like to call systemic plight issues within our community that are really disproportional compared to other nationalities.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to do is come up with an organization that would really begin to address those issues.
Yeah.
And so that's why we started Every Black Life Matters. First of all, it gives us the right vocabulary, keeps us in the exact same vein as BLM.
Yeah.
And it gives us the right vocabulary for when we're asked, do Black Lives Matter? We can say, you know what? I'll take you one further. Every single Black life matters to me. Now, does every single Black life matter to you?
Yeah.
And then they're like, I stepped in it, didn't I? You got to answer that one.
Which it shouldn't be a moral dilemma,
Yeah.
No, it should be like, oh yeah, of course.
Right.
That's right.
Maybe, oh wow, I didn't think of that. That's what it should be, an epiphany.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It usually is, because I have confronted a few BLM folks, and you're asking them, well, don't you think that the fact that 30% of African Americans are being killed in the womb, do those Black Lives Matter? Do you think that the kids who are forced to go to bad schools, their lives matter?
Yeah.
Do you think that it's like 70% of all African American kids are born in fatherless homes? Do those kids' lives matter? And they look at you like, well, they're afraid to say no.
Yeah.
They can't.
Right.
But they know if they say yes, they're just jumping in right where you are. And so a couple of times I've had those encounters, I've asked them those 3 questions, and they've had to nod. And I said, well, in that case, you agree with me, you agree with us. And then I usually at that point give them Every Black Life Matter pin, a badge, and I say, here, you need to wear this.
Yeah.
And they put it on.
Wow.
That's the great thing about it, because it merges the. Now, of course, I'm not talking to people who are out there burning buildings.
Right.
That's right.
Who actually genuinely think that they can embrace the BLM movement. In reality, that's everything that they shouldn't be embracing, right? Because if you look at BLM, it's against nuclear family, and they've taken that out of their website, but it used to be there. It's for Marxism. It's for a whole host of things that actually are the cause of the very cause of the Black plight today. The only reason you have problems in inner cities is because of welfare, which has chased the father out of the home. That's why we have this problem. That's why African American young men are seen as thugs and criminals. Why? Because that portion of the population does do most of our crime.
Right.
Well, why do they do most of the crime? Because of these Democrat policies, because of these socialist policies, because of these Marxist policies. We've created that narrative, not we, but the left has created the narrative.
Yeah.
Now for BLM to come and say, hey, we're going to fix it by giving you more of that. Imagine. Imagine the next 20 years.
Yeah. That's a good point, because I guess when things get frustrating, it's because you can find yourself in a conversation and someone, when they're raising the issues, they actually hit the mark. If they're talking, or not, I'm sorry, not the issues, the effects. If they start speaking about the effects, and it's like, yeah, I see that. Yeah, that happens. And then they start pointing to the cause of the effect. And it's like, well, no, actually. And then actually, before we get into this outer circle of like blaming a bunch of enemies, I think that there is some self-health care that we need to be focused on. And on you guys' website, you talk about high expectations. And I'm wondering if that hits on that a little bit. Could you talk about that a bit?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah. So fundamentally, what we were being spoon-fed all of our lives, and I've come from inner city. I was born in projects in Hunters Point in San Francisco, and so I kind of, I'm speaking generally, but I'm speaking also from that inner city experience. We are spoon-fed as we go through school. Guess what? You're the oppressed ones. You're not going to be able to go anywhere. You're not going to be able to accomplish anything. You're not going to be able to do anything because the boogeyman, They, right now we call it the white man.
Yeah.
But it could be any number of issues out there that are specifically against you. So just take that out of your head, and it really sets us with a very sort of limited and narrowly focused, low bar of expectation. In other words, we don't think that we can be entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. We don't think that we could be, rich someday and live in a mansion. We don't think that we can even be married these days. I mean, marriage is is even sort of a fantasy world for a lot of people in our community now. Yeah. So we suffer with this sort of oppressive victim caricatures that we sort of carry around in our head. And so therefore, when we have these big movements come around that says, you know what, we're your meal ticket. I mean, we're going to pay you $150 a day to just go out and tear some things up. You're not going to really make it anyway. The world's against you. White man's against you. So why don't we just go out and tear up some stuff and really bring about some radical revolutionary change in our streets? And that message, quite honestly, it resonates with a lot of people, as you can see. I mean, we see what kind of chaos, riots, and violence that's out there. Most, if not all of these people that are doing the violent acts are actually being paid. That fact is not being mentioned a whole lot. They think it's, sort of viral and it just happens. No, it's these people are actually being paid to do some stuff and being supplied the materials that they need in order to carry out their nefarious deeds. But, the point is that we've suffered from low expectations long enough. The reality is a lot of, kids and a lot of young people in our community don't realize that you can just be an entrepreneur just like you guys. Yeah. Yeah. Just get you an Instagram account, get you a Facebook, get you a podcast started. And guess what? You're in business. Yeah. You have Patreon, you're done. Yeah. It's not, in other words, it's not rocket science. It's really not difficult in America to say, you know what, I'm not going to kneel and bow to this sort of set of low expectations that most of society or my teachers or my professors have for me. I'm actually going to do something entrepreneurial. And it's not going to take, it's no big deal. All I have to do is get my website up and start a podcast. Right. But we, in general, and I'm speaking general, we just don't think in those terms. We think, right. Oh, well, yeah, you're right. It's all rigged against us. There's a finite amount of money and it's all in white hands and we don't have any and it's all jacked up. Yeah. You know what I mean? No, that's absolutely. Kind of the prevailing mindset out there. Yeah. I remember. And we have to do better. We have to combat that one.
I 100% agree. I remember after I finished undergrad, I remember having this thought. It's like college is not actually necessary. Yeah. I mean, work ethic is, but and so what I remember, especially for our generation, what was being pumped to us, the I guess antithesis of what you said is being pumped, Kevin. I guess the higher end was go to college, and that's the only message. That was the alternative message, go to college. And so where I was in college is I was with a bunch of people who were in college and didn't know why. They didn't know what major they wanted to do. They didn't know what they were passionate about. And then by the time we graduated, there were people who had jobs with things they don't even care about. They just knew they had to have money. And I think that was a result of the mindset of, like, say, I remember when I was in elementary school, all of the black boys wanted to go to the NBA or the NFL. And right. so the response is, whoa, pump the brakes. Only this percentage of guys go to the NBA and the NFL. You need to go to college. And I'm thinking maybe some of that may be true. However, I think you should probably teach them, okay, you want to go to the NBA or the NFL? Learn how to work. Yeah. Learn how to work hard. Because then even if they don't make it to the NBA or NFL, they don't need to be taught that they have to have a contingency plan. Work ethic is already built in to their DNA. But I had another question for you, Kevin, before we change and shift gears and talk about the Christian and politics that I have for you, Neil. But there was something you mentioned in the spiel for the start of Every Black Life Matters, and it was very quick when you talked about abortion. Yeah. You said targeted. As in regards to the black community and abortion, targeted. Yep. Such a loaded word. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so what's come out over the past several years, actually, I've written a couple books about it, is Planned Parenthood was actually started as a way, as a methodology, as a scheme, if you will, to exterminate the Negro population. Exterminate the Negro population is Margaret Sanger's exact quote.
Oh, no.
So Margaret Sanger was the founder of Planned Parenthood. She was a women's KKK member and speaker, frequent speaker. She was diabolical. She called blacks reckless breeders, weeds and scourge of society, all kinds of things you can read up about her.
Mm-hmm.
And we on this podcast know about her, but some of your listeners may not.
That's
Maybe
right.
you want to do some research on her. But her goal for starting Planned Parenthood was to exterminate blacks.
Yeah.
I mean, she really hated us, and she wanted to do that. Now, the good news is just this year, actually just maybe 4 months ago, we had Planned Parenthood of New York come out and fully admit that they have been systemically racist and targeting Black communities based on their founder, Margaret Sanger.
Kevin, are you sure that's true? Because I haven't seen that on my favorite news channels.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood. Yeah, exactly. Planned Parenthood of New York, yes, and that's one of the largest ones in the country.
Yeah.
So, and then they stopped. They sort of, and it has been reported, but it's reported for a half of a cycle. Mm-hmm. They literally stopped handing out the Margaret Sanger Award this year because all of her past sins are now finally getting some, traction, and we're seeing it. And she's been outed as a systemic racist. So here's my question. And what I knew a lot of people that were running for office, and I said, look, there's a lot of talk in our streets about systemic racism. The people you're running against are fully supported by Planned Parenthood, and they fully support Planned Parenthood. Mm-hmm. Planned Parenthood outed themselves as a systemically racist organization just a few months ago. Mm-hmm. Your number one factor that you should be running on and putting your candidate on defense is to specifically call them a racist, a systemic racist, a racist that is all about exterminating blacks. Mm-hmm. And put them on a defense and have them answer.
Right. Yeah.
No, of course, none of them did it, and of course they lost their races. But we have to get better if we're sincere. Yeah. We have a lot of people in BLM. We have a lot of corporations that supposedly support BLM. If we are sincere about trying to identify and eradicate systemic racism, then we must. It's not even, it's not even a question. It's unequivocal. Mm-hmm. We must start with Planned Parenthood. And that's not because I hate the organization, right? But I do hate what they stand for. Yeah. I hate the premise on why they were started.
Yeah, right.
And so we've got to do that work. And so that's right. And that's the specific targeting that I was referring to.
That would be before the fatherlessness, before the high expectations, before all that stuff happens. You have to be born, and they're there to be like, no. So before anyone could experience the hateful racist rhetoric of Donald Trump, they got to be born.
Yeah. I mean, think about this. Think about one real quick one, Neil, and then I'll let you think about this. In 1970, I think it was 77 or 79, when Jesse Jackson ran for his first time running for president. Mm-hmm. He actually coined the term Black genocide. He says Planned Parenthood is committing Black genocide. This is Jesse Jackson in the 1970s, right before he was running. Then when he ran, the Democrats slapped him across the head and said, if you want this money, you better change your tone about your Black genocide and Planned Parenthood. Ever since then, guess what? He is all in for exterminating blacks. Yeah. It's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable.
And if you think about it, if you really wanted to destroy the African American community, you want to exterminate the race, what would you do? Well, first of all, you would make sure that they aren't being born. Secondly, you'd make sure that their family structure was being destroyed. And you'd make sure that they're being targeted as criminals. You'd pass a crime bill to put most of the other people in prisons and jails. right? Most of the men in prison were in jail. And you'd make sure that they weren't getting a good education. And then 5, you'd make sure that even when they were getting killed in gangs, you didn't do anything about it.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of a better system of how to eradicate the Black communities and the Black ethnicity here in America, this would be how you would do it. And every single one of those policies are pushed by the left. And worse, when the Republicans, when the right says, no, we shouldn't be giving out free welfare because it breaks up the family. We shouldn't be giving out handouts because it makes dependency. We're called the racists.
Yeah.
The Republicans are like, hey, the Republicans went from freeing the slaves to hating the slaves. No. Just because they are actually helping people and telling them not to be dependent, you call that racism?
Right.
And this is the whole narrative of the mainstream media.
Yeah.
So we've got to understand how this thing has all been carved out, and people are actually focused on how to destroy the African American community and then make sure that they never understand the truth.
Yeah. And, we witnessed that firsthand. Obviously, we witnessed it growing up where we grew up. But even now, as our church does mission and we care for people in our community, and we have a lot of refugees that land in the area that we live. We have people trying to get on their feet. And what we experience is this trapping that happens through welfare in a sense. You have, because there are people who receive the welfare and they say, "Oh, calm a day, I'm good." But then there are people who say, "Look, I came here for a purpose, and I'm glad that this helped me get on my feet, but I wanted to get a job, and the money I'm receiving from the government is a little bit too little for me to support my family, so I need to get a job. But the moment I say that this job has accepted me, that money goes away, and I have to wait 2 or 3 weeks before I can have anything to feed my family. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. This government funding, I can't pay my rent in. I'm only paying installments, and I'm behind the 8 ball every single month. I need to try to get out of it, but if I try to get out of it, it seems like I'm penalized for trying to get out of it and get on my and be independent and supporting my family. And they just feel stuck, and they don't know what to do. And people don't recognize that that's what happens. And then obviously you have the, I guess, just the poison behind giving incentives to not work. I know multiple people who throughout COVID lost a job, but are like, "Look, I'm not going to go get another job." Have explicitly told me, "I'm not going to go get another job. I'm getting paid right now by the government." And so, no, I'm not going to go get a job. The jobs that I've looked at are paying less than what the government's giving me right now. So give me this cheese. But
what's interesting though is, did you know that Nigerians who look like ethnically like any African American, right, are actually one of the highest earning groups of people in America? It starts with it's like the Asians, and then it's like there's a couple of like Polish and I think Croatians in between, and then it's the Nigerians who are making the most amount of money, right? So you can't look at that and say, look, well, if there really was a systemic racism and everybody hated Black people in America, the white people, then why are the Nigerians doing so well? Why are the Vietnamese doing so well? Why are the Indians doing so well, right? You have to ask yourself those questions. And part of it is because of their cultural background is don't take handouts.
That's right.
The Nigerians come here and they're like, no handout. We came here, we're going to work hard, we're going to do it. Vietnamese, same way. A lot of times the Chinese are the same way. And a lot of times the Indians are the same way.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good segue, because when you talk about all of this and you get into the weeds of different policies or wanting to be a part of the discussion, sometimes the Christian can respond and say, look, I'm going to sit on the fence. I don't really, I'll leave my brain at home. And I'll leave my faith at home, which should then be powering my brain, and I'll just let things be as they are. Neil, what would you have to say about the Christian that thinks in such a way regarding politics and their faith?
The first thing, obviously, is any Christian that says they should not be involved in politics, what they're saying is that these things should still be legal. Slavery, obviously, racism, child labor, child prostitution, temple prostitution, abandonment of children in the wild, abandonment of elders in the wild, killing of twins, superstitious killing of twins, the burning of widows. I mean, you can go down the line. The last 2,000 years, Christians have gotten involved in politics precisely to change all those evil laws or evil cultures. I mean, even gladiatorial combat, it was a Christian who stopped gladiatorial combat. Now, here's what is very important too. You can't just say we should preach the gospel, because the gospel was preached for 200 years in two of the most Christian nations in the world. That was England and the colonies, right? America. And slavery continued every day in those Christian nations. It wasn't until Christians said, William Wilberforce in England said, we must change the law, and they got involved in politics, that these bad laws would change. So you can't just sit down and say, I'm just going to preach about gospel and God will do the rest. No, William Wilberforce had to change the laws. We have to change the laws, so we have to get involved. Now, here's where the danger is. You have to understand the difference between a social justice gospel and a biblical moral law, right? The social justice gospel says there's a group of oppressed, there's the critical race theory, there's the background of BLM, right? We believe in critical race theory, which, and I can talk about it later if we have time, but basically the idea here is that if you are more oppressed or you have a history of more oppression, then you have the moral high ground. It doesn't matter what you say or what you do, you have the moral high ground. So in other words, if you say this is wrong, it's wrong just because you're black. Now, what's interesting, first of all, is it doesn't work because there have been more white slaves in the history of mankind than there have been black slaves. In fact, the word slave comes from Slav, which was the Slavics. Right?
People aren't going to like this, Neil. They're not going to like this.
So here's the reality. You can't say that black people are oppressed any more than you can say white. Everybody was oppressed. It's all sin. Sin is the key. And why is sin the key? Because morality is what we don't know about. We don't know morality. We are immoral people. We are depraved people, and only God can tell us what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
And it's only by, well, I shouldn't say only God, but also God's creation, because we can understand the laws of nature and the nature of God, and that's how we derive a morality. But again, the reality here is that you can't use critical race theory, which is what they're trying to push on us, saying that a color or a system of color or an oppressive is what makes someone right or wrong. And so this is what we as Christians have to understand is, what laws should we advocate for? What sort of justice should we advocate for? And here's where people get confused. They think that if somebody feels bad about it or doesn't like something, then they should step and advocate. No, we advocate God's moral laws, not anybody. Right. And God's moral laws does not include socialism, and it does not include free handouts and welfare. Why? Because nowhere in the Bible does it say the government should provide charity. Everywhere in the Bible it says the church should provide charity freely and voluntarily. And there are many good reasons for this. And one of the best reasons is that the government is so inefficient at charity. For every dollar I give to the government, you're lucky if 15 cents gets to the person who needs it. The rest goes through pensions, buildings, salaries, union dues, paying off politicians, right? Because all stuff and 15 cents get to the person. When you go to a church or you go to a private charity, and the private charity will give almost 85 cents of every dollar to the poor. And it actually gets it 6 times more efficient in many cases. And so that's where we should be focused on. You want social justice, let the church support those things, the feeding the poor and all that, but let the government support protecting their rights. And here's the other very important distinction. There's a difference between rights and goods. The Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And people forget what a right is. A right is not a good. A right is something that God gives you, like the right to have a house, the right to own a gun, the right to freedom of speech. But what God does not give you, He does not give you a printing press to have that right to freedom of speech. He doesn't give you a gun to have that right to bear arms. You have to buy your own gun. You have to buy your own printing press. So what happens is, if you say education is a right, where are you going to get that education from? Let's say you say, oh, everybody has a right to an education. Well, everybody has a right to an education, but they have to buy their own education. They're not entitled to somebody else's education. Because if you say education is right, where are you going to get that education from? Are you going to kidnap and enslave a bunch of teachers, force them to educate everyone? Of course, we can't do that. So what we do is we enslave everybody and take a portion of their education.
That's right.
That's what is called a service of good. So education, healthcare, these are all services of good. And the minute you allocate services of goods as though they're rights, you have to enslave a certain portion of the population to acquire those goods and then disseminate it freely to other people who have never earned it. This is a violation of rights. And so what is God interested in? What is politics interested in? Politics should be a protection of rights. The government has only 2 purposes. One is to protect our rights from enemies within or without, and to enforce contracts. That's really it. Those are the only 2 things supposed to be done.
What you said in the beginning regarding preach the gospel, preach the gospel. I mean, you know, we obviously we've recognized the flaws behind that, even within this country, where, you know, there are a bunch of Christians that still had slaves, you know, and I think we even see that principle being implemented today, where you hear the word gospel a lot, and in my conversation with Christians, a lot of Christians don't even know what it is.
Yeah,
it's more a place filler for, you know, Christianese, whatever it means, do good things, be a good person. And meanwhile, it's a message, it's a story, a very imminent and very practical regarding the history of this world, human beings, and God Himself and His relationship and His plan to redeem this world. And so when people don't understand it, they end up rooting their lives in things that are antithetical to the very gospel that they claim to be for.
Yep.
And that's just, I don't quite understand that. But something that Darren and I share in, Kevin, that I want you to speak on is, you were saying a lot of conservative stuff, but you black, man, you're not supposed to talk like that. What has been your journey as what has been your journey as an individual from where you're from, and with the values you have, and people responding to you kind of like with a slave master mentality that says, look, I don't think you should think this way.
Right.
And there's a problem with that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I have, by God's grace, I've had the entire gamut, and this is why our work with Every Black Life Matters is so important, because we've lived it. I lived the entire gamut of abject poverty through to abundance. Neil has lived it. He's lived communism, socialism, Marxism. His grandfather was, you know, a communist leader. I mean, you know, and he was born in Africa, and he can tell you more of his story. But so I was born at Hunters Point, abject poverty. Then by the time I was, I think 7, moved to a lower middle class neighborhood in San Francisco. And then from there was, you know, born and raised in, you know, leftism, liberalism. That was just all I knew. Mm-hmm. And went to San Jose State and graduated with a sociology degree. Mm. And so I was steeped in leftism. I get it. I mean, I lived it most of, you know, at least a quarter of my life or half of my life. And I lived it and I understand it in and out. So when people say, "Oh, Kev, you just don't lose me with that." Mm-hmm. I get it. I know exactly where you are. Don't give me that. So, and then one thing happened though, is when I got married, and my wife also lived it. She was inner city Detroit, born and raised, you know, her family's still in the system and doing, you know, what they do. Still very much inner city Detroit is where her family is right now, even to this day. So, and then she moved to California. We, you know, God just put us together. We met and vibed together and got married. When we both got married, we thought we were leftist liberals. Mm-hmm. We just, you know, because that was all we knew. Yeah. But one of the things interesting happened. We said, you know, we want to get married and we want to live just 100% biblical. Let's just see if we can do that. Because we were sort of marginal or secular Christians. You know, we had compromises here and there. And it was, I mean, we loved the Lord, but we still had issues, right? Yeah. And so we, you know, we decided, okay, let's just live biblically and just see what that's like. And it's the most challenging, but yet the most invigorating, you know, lifestyle that we could ever imagine on living. I mean, because, you know, really it's just different. And so we've been living like that. And then the Lord said, you know, you've been discipled in all these other domains, all these other areas of your life. There's one area I want you and your wife to look at. And he said this to us, ironically, at the same time, but separately. Mm. It was like we came back the end of the day, and that particular day, and said, you know, I've been kind of thinking about this whole politics thing. And she said, oh, I was too. I was like, oh. And so it's like he lifted the veil and he says, look, this thing, this way that you've been voting, this way that you've been seeing the world, this way that you've been understanding the world with this lens of liberalism and the Democrat Party on, doesn't really align, son.
Yeah.
He said, son, you have to look at, this, and this. Now, I realize that my journey is very different than a lot of other people. This is what God did for me. He lifted the veil and allowed me, Kevin, and my wife, Tracy, to see. And so that's not what happens to everybody else, but it happened to us. And so we were able to see plainly, like, you know what? This is not us. We have to vote differently. So since Reagan's second term, we've been voting conservative or GOP. And let me tell you that, say a little bit more about that, because we are not GOPers.
Right.
I mean, we'll vote that way, but, we're quite honestly, we'll vote for anybody in any party as long as they align with God's principles.
Right. And for those,
so when I talk to people, I don't advocate that our community switches parties. I say, look, why don't you just become an independent, leave yourself wide open, weigh the word of God, weigh your candidate in each election, and then make your decision. It's fine.
Let me give a quick clarification for those listening who may not know what GOP is. It's Republican. It stands for Grand Old Party. But I realize that a lot of people don't know what that actually is, but they do know what Republican is, and obviously it's a white racist man. But go ahead.
Yeah. So that was our journey. That was my journey. And, I mean, I could vote for today, Democrats in Louisiana. You happen to have a couple of Democrat mayors and Democrat governor down there that are pro-life, and they stand for, they're anti-Marxist, and they pretty much stand for the types of things that would align with, a biblical reality. So I could vote for those types of people. And you used to have blue dog Democrats that you could cast a vote for, potentially that kind of a candidate. Unfortunately, they've been expunged. They've been run out of the party. And right now, today, that party is far, far radical left. And it doesn't look at all like the JFK Democrats back in the day.
Right.
So I happen to be a Black conservative, not because I wanted to or chose to, or I was born under a GOP. No, it was, God's grace. He lifted the veil and said, look at this. And for us, we looked at it and it didn't line up. And we said, okay, we really have to do something about this. And so we started doing what we felt that the Lord was telling us to do. So that's how it happened.
And it's so a shame that when someone is describing themselves as a person, they have to give disclaimers as if we aren't all individuals with individual thought. And it's because we're so plugged in to our TVs and our teachers that the human experience isn't actually lived anymore. It's read about in people's blogs and on their TV channels. And so if someone is understanding someone's experience in life, it's not because they were there with them or they even sat with them and listened to them. It's because they heard about it from some third party. And it was corroborated maybe by a famous author or expert on the human experience, and then people adopt it. And as a result of that, we have people who are so far gone regarding what would be beneficial for society. And Neil, with Kevin mentioning that what you experienced as far as this political structure that people are clamoring for regarding socialism and thinking that that's actually good, a lot of that comes out of ignorance and not knowing what it actually is. But could you share with us some of that and then explain to us why an American would not want to vie for socialist government?
Well, so let me give you a bit of my background. So I was born in Ghana in Africa, grew up in Jamaica, Sudan, Yemen, Ethiopia. My parents are ethnically Indian. So I say I'm ethnically Indian, culturally African, although now I'm culturally American, right? So since I've been here long enough. But the background, my family, though, my family consists of Marxists and Leninists. In fact, when I would go home, because we'd go home to India every now and then to visit, and the arguments around the table were whether the Communist Party Marxist was better or the Communist Party of India was better. So that was the discussion at the table, right?
Yikes.
Which fine niche of the party that they would want to join. And then two of my uncles were on the run from Nehru, who was another socialist, and he didn't like their brand of Marxism, and he was trying to kill all the communists. And so I came out of that. My dad was a communist and an atheist till I was about 5 or 6, and so the conversations definitely, we had a lot of conversations about that. So the basic problem with communism will work perfectly in heaven.
Man.
Because you have to be a perfect, sinless individual.
Yes.
And the problem with communism is that because people are not, in fact, the very first time communism was tried in America, it failed miserably. And the person who tried it, who later on went on to influence the school system, Dewey was part of that, that whole commune there, not the commune, but the whole ideology of that. They said, well, the reason it failed is because Americans have too much self-independence. Wow. And so we have to breed into them right from an early age this idea that they're all part of the working class. And so we need to get into the educational system. So starting from the educational system, they start working things all the way up. But the idea of communism and socialism basically is that there are two things. One, the government knows better than you poor, miserable peasant, right? We have these economic geniuses in government who will tell you what jobs are important, what jobs are critical, how much you should buy. If you go to a store, how much you can pay for something, how much your labor is worth. We have a better idea of all this. We're going to control all these things, and we will have a better society as a result of that. Now, anytime you look at this, you have to ask yourself, and there's a question that Jesus asked Pilate. Pilate says, "Are you king of the Jews?" And Jesus asked him this question. It's a great question to ask anybody. Jesus said, "Is that something you came up with, or did somebody tell you that?"
Yeah.
And it's a great question. So whenever somebody talks about socialism or communism or anything, I just ask, is that something you came up with yourself after a lot of thinking, or did somebody just tell you that and you repeat it? Now, it puts them in a bind. Because if somebody just told them that, then they better tell me why they believe it. But if they came up with it, then tell me the thinking process that got you there, which is usually non-existent. And when you ask them that, they think socialism solves problems. And so I asked it, well, so tell me, who is this government official who is a genius in the economy that can prevent market crashes, that can prevent recessions and depressions and meltdowns? Who is this genius out there? And when have we ever seen them? And who is this genius who's also an angel who will then never try to take advantage of the system, pay off his buddies over you? And the third thing is, if there is a group of elites in government, what makes you think you'll be part of them and not one of the working class people at the bottom? Right? So these are the basic questions that you ask. Now, the problem with socialism basically is that there are no perfect people. And the other part, and if you go to communism, which is basically everyone works as hard as they can and takes only what they need. If you ever remember sin nature, we're all what? Selfish, greedy, proud, lazy, right? So what happens is instead of everybody working as hard as we can, we work as little as we can. And instead of taking as little as we need, we take as much as we can. Right? You end up with what? You end up with shortages. Why do you think school programs always want more money? Like, look, you're actually getting paid more than some private schools, and yet you want more money, more money, more money. Why? Because guess what? People, they reach the lowest common denominator. Socialism just doesn't work. It's never been able to work. It has never worked in the past. Of course, when you talk to today's socialists, they'll go, well, it wasn't done right. But this time, we will do it right. And I'm like, look, I come from a series. I mean, as I said, I have a history of this communism in my background. It's never worked. It works in families. Maybe dad, mom,
I know.
sacrifice for each other. It works, but usually it only works if there's some spanking.
Man, let's hope that they don't adopt that ideology for slavery. They just didn't do it right.
If only we had got it right. That's funny, because that was the argument for freeing the slaves. A lot of the slave masters says, look, if we free the slaves, the black people can't take care of themselves. Who will take care of them?
That's right. That's right.
We can't just let them go. We can't just let them free.
No, that's
the funny thing was, once they were, if you think about it, slavery was doomed to destruction. Why was the South so unable to fight the North? It was because the South was economically depressed. In the North, they had all this freedom and all the inventions on all this development. In the South, I mean, think about it. You can't, let's say you have 20 slaves. You got to have 4 people to keep those slaves from running and escaping. You got to feed them. You got to feed their wives. You got to clothe them. You got to provide free healthcare. You provide all these things. And each one of those slaves costs you a lot of money. And so now you've got, and so maybe those 20 slaves are giving you, of the 20 slaves, only 10 are actually workers.
Yeah.
So of those 10 workers who don't want to work, maybe 4 of them are actually doing the work, right? Well, now imagine if I hired a group of 4 contractors, independent contractors. Yeah. They would do far more work than I was getting out of those, and I wouldn't have to hire all this infrastructure to capture escaped slaves.
Right.
The South is falling apart economically. It just didn't work.
Something I genuinely appreciate, you guys, is that you're a voice crying out from the wilderness, right? I mean, I think that's what the Christian is to be, is especially as we are sojourners in this world right now, vying for the truth, which is not just a message in and of itself. He's a person. And a lot of something that breaks my heart, I talk about this often, is that there are a lot of Christians that attack Christians who are speaking out about certain things. Yep. And something you just said, Neil, about kind of transferring us back to the conversation when slavery was happening. I think when we look at things in retrospect, we have such a convenient perspective. And one of those convenient perspectives is that when people look back on slavery today, they can easily say, yeah, it was evil. And what's implied is that if I was living during that time, I would have never been someone vying for slavery or someone who had been a proponent of slavery. I would have spoken out against it. Meanwhile, that was the social norm. It's the social norm. And now we have social norms today that people are speaking out against. And there are so many people who are showing the side that they're on. Yep. And showing just how much it costs to speak out. And they're weighing that. And I think weighing it accurately. And some of them are responding, unfortunately, inaccurately and saying, look, I'm going to be quiet. Or I'm going to say whatever gets me less gripe from people listening. Everything else. What are some, I guess, either conversations or backlash you've had from Christians regarding your message and what you stand to do with Every Black Life Matters?
You know, honestly, we haven't received much backlash, and I don't know whether that's because, Neil and I aren't, little guys, and maybe our stature gives us a certain amount of, you don't just go up to some big brothers talking crazy. So, so that could be part of, because let's be honest. Black Lives Matter and Antifa, these are cowardice people. These are really cowardice people. They only want to pick on weak, frail, older, shorter stature, white people ideally. I mean, that's their target. And they will take a swing or two at a black person, but always behind your back or when you're not, it's just cowardly. It's just a bunch of punks. But anyway, so we, fundamentally with our message of Every Black Life Matters, we really haven't had any backlash or pushback on it because,
that's good.
Once people recognize what that really means, and if you look at our shirts and our paraphernalia, we have these pillars. It's inarguable. I mean, if Black Lives Matter generally, then of course every single Black Life matter in these very specific ways. And if they don't to you, then you're a hypocrite. You're faking the funk. I mean,
yeah, and we've actually, a lot of people have confused us. I had a couple of experiences on airlines where the flight attendant came and asked me for a badge.
Wow.
Because it said Every Black Life Matters, right?
Yeah.
And I was arguing with my wife. I said, I don't think she knows that we're not BLM.
Yeah.
She must, because it says right there on the badge, about that we're pro-life. It's got the feet on it. It's got our, if you haven't seen the logo, it's got our, there's the logo right there. It's got the feet right above the Kevin's head too, right? So, it's very blatant. It says fatherhood initiative. It says nuclear family. It says all that on the badge. And I think she was asking for the badge, and it says on our T-shirt. So So I gave her a bunch, and then a few minutes later, another stewardess attendant came over and asked me for kept asking me until all four of the people in the back had these badges. And towards the end, as I was leaving, I said, I got to figure this out if they really know who we are, as opposed to what BLM is. And so I went back and I said, look, can I ask you a question? I said, how come you asked me for a badge? And she said, well, I saw that you had the badges and I thought we'd like it. And she said, this is the only badge that the airline will let us wear.
Wow.
So she's thinking it's BLM.
Wow.
And at that point, I said, fine, great, thank you. And
stick it on.
Yeah, man. Wear it proudly.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
So, but the beauty of that is it still gets the message out there.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that's a bridge thing. Now, we've had a couple of Christians come and say, no, all lives matter. And we said, look, hang on. We realize all lives matter. In fact, in our webpage, it says clearly all lives matter. In fact, we say that there is only one race, and that's the human race.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are multiple ethnicities, there are multiple cultures, and people confuse culture and ethnicity.
That's right.
You can be black growing up in Silicon Valley, and you can be black growing up in Oakland.
Right.
You can be ethnically the same, but completely different cultures.
That's right.
If you grew up in Silicon Valley as the son of Kevin's son grew up in completely a different culture than the inner city black that he grew up at.
Mm-hmm.
And yet ethnically they're the same. And so people confuse that. And so what we're trying to tell people is, look, black lives do matter, but if we say all lives matter, they will call you a racist and it ends the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're telling people is, look, we don't want to end the conversation because then you may as well not have the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And they think, oh, all those white people are racist, right? But if you as a white person can go up and say, I believe every black life matters, you've just made the bridge.
Yeah.
Right.
You did that connection, and as we call it Aikido, right? Mm-hmm. And the art of Aikido is to deflect the opponent's force, and in fact, in such a way that you don't hurt him or yourself. And so you can always say, do you want to win the argument or do you want to win the person?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We want to win the person. So that's why we're saying, that's why we have the word black in our logo, because in our motto, because that is what will bridge that conversation, build the bridge to have that conversation. I think it's very critical because otherwise we're just shouting at each other and nothing ever happens.
That's right. Well, I'm definitely
the other thing that I just want to set straight as well, because some people would say, look, I mean, I get what you're doing, but why do you have to have black in your moniker and kind of use the same nomenclature that they have? Is number one, yes, the Aikido move where we can use somebody's force and momentum against them and actually change the direction, but we're in the same vein, so we can actually be a counter movement and really, do some major, good works by using their force and energy against them. That's one part of it. But the other part of it is that too many people are quick to dismiss that there is systemic plight that is really disproportional in the Black community. And so part of our message is, look, we don't want to just overlook that, yes, Blacks are targeted in the womb. Mm-hmm. Blacks are targeted to make sure that they go to public schools. Blacks are targeted that their fathers are not in the home. Mm-hmm. Per Joe Biden and Bill Clinton, Blacks are targeted for, criminal justice, extra long sentencing. Yeah. These are specific plights that are barriers that are disproportional. No other, ethnicity are targeted in this specific way, in these specific ways. Mm-hmm. So we believe that you should have a Black-led organization or a Black organization that's going to take on these specific issues that are barriers or plight today in the Black community. And it's perfectly acceptable to do that. Right. You understand what I'm saying? Absolutely. I mean, so too many people say, no, all lives matter, every life matters. No, I don't want to hear it. No, and I'm trying to, we have to tell, our white brothers and sisters and some of these other nationalities, look, slow down. There is disproportional plight. And all we want you to do is recognize that it's not even, of course, all lives matter. We get it. That's not, right. That's a ridiculous thing. Yeah. But But we do need to focus in on the specific areas that are disproportional in the Black community.
Yeah.
And that's what we're saying.
Absolutely.
Right. And if we don't address it now, it's going to get worse.
Well, yeah. I think
right?
we've gone so far away because the word Black in Black Lives Matter sort of serves as a Trojan horse. And it draws people in. It's like, oh, this is about me. And then the direction it begins to take you is opposite of what would benefit you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people don't know that. And I'm so grateful for you gentlemen and the work that you do. Be sure I'm going to end up with one of those mugs and a shirt and a pen.
Oh, yeah.
Neil, I want a pen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Real quick, share how people can find you. What social media do you have? How can people support you?
Yeah.
So we have a website, and it's a wonderful website. Please go to the website, take a look at all the resources, materials, videos, blog entry. I mean, we've got all kinds of material out there. And our short stories, Neil and myself, is out on the website, and it's www.everyblm.com.
Okay.
EveryBLM.com. So you can go there for that. We also have a vibrant and ever-growing Facebook presence, Instagram, YouTube. So we have all of the major platforms, and it's EveryBLM is our moniker on all those different platforms. So you can find us, that way. We have memberships where you could become a member. We have donor programs where you can donate. Every little bit helps. Here's where I want our community to be thinking about. Neil and I, we do this work because it's needed. We see the plight, we see the disproportionality of it, and we're committed to doing the work. So we need donors, and we need active donors. One of the things that we love to be able to do, and we've been positioning ourselves for this, is when those little babies are slaughtered overnight in Chicago, Detroit, New York via stray bullets, we want and need to be able to go to those families, go directly to those families in their time of major crisis. Could you imagine the stress?
Right.
And help them financially and emotionally, and help them to set up their, GoFundMe page and do all of that work for them. These families literally have their lives turned upside down with these types of tragic incidents, and they happen pretty frequently.
Yeah.
And we want BLM, they got $2 billion and they're sending it all to Act Blue and doing what they do. We want to be that institution that goes to those families and say, look, we get it. We're so sorry. We're here with you. We're going to help walk you through this. And give that proper burial for that little baby, give that, give emotional and financial support as much as we can. And so that takes donations. That takes good, fun-loving people who are ready to support an organization that's ready to do the hard work. We are a 501c3, so it's all tax deductible. And so, we're hopeful that that resonates with people, because we're going to be doing that work. We are going to be partnering with other organizations like Douglas Leadership Institute, Woodson Institute, on fatherless initiatives in various community programs. So we'll start to do that in 2021. We'll also be doing a lot of work with Life, Students for Life. We'll be doing some marches with them, in conjunction with them. And we'll be going, standing up for life, especially for Black life, because it's really specifically disproportionately targeted in the womb. And so we have a lot on our plate. And we have some great donors, and we want that donor.
You haven't mentioned the training too. The training.
Yeah, training. Yeah, let me say a little bit about that. So you're a Christian blog, and you Christian brothers. Here's the thing: a lot of our churches really don't. 46% voted a particular way that is completely anti-Christ this past election, just 2 weeks ago. 54% voted that in a way that is more Christ-like. That is a real stark divide in the body of Christ.
Yes.
If you're looking at the bride of Christ, we are an ugly bride with soiled, veil and everything else. I mean, we're in bad shape, and we need to sort of fit that, meet that divide and make that, a little bit more unified. So we're ready and willing to go to churches and do Remnant Rising conferences or workshops to help bring churches along with understanding civic engagement, understanding critical race theory, Black liberation theology, the infusing of these demonic theologies into our gospel, what that means, how that works, how that looks, allow them to ask whatever questions they want to ask, whatever questions. The church needs to be available for people to ask the most obnoxious and most difficult questions. The reason why we're not having the impact that we think that we should be having by now in the culture and in our church communities is a lot of times people are not being discipled and they're not being, given the opportunity to ask the tough questions about, well, how do I really vote? How should I really feel about this? How does this really work? Is this really racist? Is it not? How does this work with the word of God? Am I a new creation? If I'm a new creation, does that mean that all the oppression that I was supposed to be feeling and all the victimization, that's all fallen away? How do all that stuff? Neil and I have been mentoring and discipling men of God, pastors and otherwise, for decades. And so God's called us forth and we're ready to do this work. So we're also working with churches and corporations to help corporations really understand sort of anti-racism from a more principled point of view, not a secular humanist point of view, principled point of view. So we're doing that work as well. So all of that, we can do, and we would encourage, help and support in getting some of that work done.
Guys, go to www.everyblm.com. Look into Every Black Life Matters. Support Kevin and Neil's work. If you are for the true growth and flourishing of the Black community, these men are doing it. And it's because they're followers of the King and they see value in life from womb to tomb. Go and support them. Kevin and Neil, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you guys' wisdom. We appreciate your work that you're doing. Our prayers are definitely with you. You'll definitely be hearing from me after I put my purchase in for my paraphernalia.
Great.
and I'll be reaching out and touching ways that we can be praying for you. And I'm hoping that down the line we can get you guys here to do a training.
Right.
Love to do it.
Plan to be in DC. We certainly plan to be in DC a lot, so you guys are right there.
Okay.
Nice.
That would be great. In case I don't hear from you before then, I hope you guys enjoy your holiday, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Neil, I hope by this time the dinner table discussion is a little bit more bearable.
Well, when I go back to India, it's still the same.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, just eat as much as possible, and then you can't talk. But no. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys.
I'm loud now, so I don't put up with much.
Guys, thank you for tuning in. As I said earlier, the election craziness is still happening, but the conversations must go on. The buzz topics may have ended, but keep talking, ask questions, and seek out the truth. Thank you for tuning in to Black and Blurred, where you're going to hear one of two things: our humble opinion
or the facts.
Holler at us.